Old Grognard says, let's look at how half-giants work in AD&D 2nd Edition's Dark Sun setting. Welcome back to Old Grognard says. So far, all of the Dark Sun player character races we've looked at are versions of existing races. With the half-giant, we get our first new player character race made specifically for this setting. Anyways, let's get started by looking at how half-giants fit into the world of Dark Sun. Giants dominate many of the islands and coastal areas of the Silt Sea, wading across it to plunder the communities of smaller races where they find them. In some lost millennium, as a bizarre experiment or perhaps as some sort of curse, giants were magically crossbred with humans. Half giants are now fairly common, especially to human controlled lands at the edge of the Sea of Dust. Here we learn that the origin of the half-giant involves magic. There's also a snoo-snoo joke in there somewhere, but I'll let everyone figure that out for themselves. The text in the rules book does a way better job of explaining the lore than I could by trying to summarize it, so let's continue. Simply put, a half-giant gains terrific size from his giant heritage, but also inherits that race's dull wits. His human background, however, provides him with an interest in communication and cooperation, not to mention more reserved traits such as curiosity, a willingness to learn, and a general tendency towards kindness. At any rate, half-giants are capable of far more kindness than their often tyrannical, bloodthirsty giant kin. Though no one knows for certain, half-giants seem to be a fairly young race, perhaps only a few tens of centuries old. There is no half-giant culture common to all of their kind. On the contrary, having insufficient history and overall intelligence to have their own culture, half-giants tend to readily adopt the cultures of other creatures they admire or associate with. Half-giants are very imitative creatures, eager to fit into new situations as they present themselves. Half-giants sometimes collect into communities of their own, though they most often adopt the culture and customs of those creatures that are nearby. When near an elven nation, for instance, half-giants will form their own hunting and raiding parties, adopting the ways of the elven marauders. They won't mix with the elves, neither will they fight with them. In most instances, imitative half-giant communities will compete directly with the race whom they are likening themselves to. It is their great size and combat prowess that keeps their competitors at a safe distance. Half-giants can switch their attitudes very quickly, taking on new values to fit new situations. A half-giant whose peaceful farming life is disrupted by marauders may soon adopt the morals of the very renegades who sacked his village. To reflect this, one aspect of a half-giant's alignment must be fixed and chosen during character creation. The other half must be chosen when they awaken each morning. They are only bound to that alignment until they sleep again. See Chapter 4, Alignment. For example, a half-giant may have a fixed lawful alignment. Every morning, he must choose to be lawful good, lawful neutral, or lawful evil. That thing it just mentioned with alignment is really important to keep in mind not only when playing half-giants, but also when dealing with them. You might get used to a half-giant being a certain way, and then they wake up one morning and are almost a different person, especially if they tend to flip between good and evil. Let's look at what the role-playing section says about this and other half-giant behavior. Half-giants are friendly and eager to please those they meet. Others who accept them find that half-giants quickly adopt their lifestyle and skills, even their values. A half-giant character who is presented with a new situation should examine the roles of the people there, determine where he might best fit in, and then start performing the tasks necessary. For example, a half-giant character who happens upon a dwarven stone quarry may watch the dwarves, then start quarrying stone himself. He won't work with the dwarves, necessarily, but if he can make a living at it, he will continue to quarry stone just like his neighbor dwarves do. This is not to say, however, that half-giants are strictly bound to perform as those they see around them, nor are they restricted from moving on. On the contrary, if the situation is not beneficial, or if the half-giant would not perform well, living in the trees like the halflings, for instance, he won't imitate it. Also, half-giants are not bound to a piece of work or lifestyle the way other races are. They seldom have regrets or reminiscences about what has gone before. They simply aren't as emotionally attached to their lives or works. Persons playing a half-giant character should be prepared to switch goals and lifestyles easily, usually based on the charismatic individuals their character meets. Remember, though, that due to size alone, half-giants make excellent fighters. Always remember their great size and roleplay accordingly. Dungeon masters should not mindlessly allow the character to fit easily through human-sized doorways or ride in a tiny wagon. Similarly, they must not forget that he can see in many second-story windows, reach things humans cannot, and lift things humans would never consider lifting. That last part about how they interact with the world is really important and can either be a boon or a curse depending on the situation. Now let's look at exactly how big half giants actually are and the game mechanics that go along with them. The physical description of half giants is short and to the point. It says, a half giant is an enormous individual, standing between 10 and 12 feet tall and weighing in the neighborhood of 1,600 pounds. Their features are human, but exaggerated. If we look on page 18 of the rules book, the base height for a half giant is 125 inches with 3d10 as a modifier. This means that their height is between 128 and 155 inches, or 10 feet 8 inches to 12 feet 11 inches tall. Base weight is 1,500 pounds for males and 1,450 for females, with a modifier of 3d100. This puts a male character between 1,503 and 1,800 pounds, and female characters between 1,453 and 1,750 pounds. If we look at age, half giants are on average a bit older than human characters and can have a maximum age of up to 220 years. Next up, we have the ability score minimums and maximums and the modifiers to those ability scores. The +4 to strength makes it where half giants can be incredibly strong, and the con bonus they have can lead to the same regenerating character thing you get with dwarf characters. Here we have the available classes and level limits for the half giant, and the multi-class combinations are over here. If you're curious about how multi-class characters work in this game, I did a video about that not too long ago, and the link to it is in the end cards at the end of this video. The half-giant's great size and extraordinary strength have an effect on their personal equipment and how they interact with the world. The paragraph that explains this is on page 10 of the rules book. It says, all personal items such as clothes, armor, weapons, food, etc. cost double for half-giant characters. Other considerations such as transportation or lodging are also considerably more expensive when they are available at all. In areas not dominated by half-giants, things such as buildings, furniture, wagons, boats, etc. aren't made to support their weight. Even in cities, they tend to camp outside to avoid destroying things. One of the things that isn't in the rules book is what size category half-giants fall under. In the Monstrous Compendium 2 Terrors Beyond Tier, they're listed as being size H, but the guidelines for size are listed at the beginning of the Monstrous Manual, and They list size H creatures as being between 12 and 25 feet tall. I prefer to say that half giants are large, since they, on average, are under 12 feet tall, and if they're size L, the game mechanics for this are fairly easy to figure out. Let me explain how this works. In second edition, weapons all have sizes, and how this works is explained on page 73 of the PHB. This is what it says. A character can always wield a weapon equal to his own size or less. Normally, this requires only one hand except for some missile weapons, bows and crossbows in particular. A character can also use a weapon one size greater than himself, although it must be gripped with two hands. Beyond this size limit, the weapon is not usable without special means, most often magical. After this, they give an example. Drelb the Halfling, size S, can use a short sword with no difficulty, a size S weapon, or a long sword with two hands, a size M weapon. But a glaive, size L, is just too large for him to wield. Likewise, he can use a short bow, but is unable to handle a long bow. Using this logic, a size L half giant can use weapons up to size L with one hand and size H weapons with two hands. So, for example, a character could use a two-handed sword or a halberd with one hand because they're size L. There aren't any size H weapons in the PHB, but we do see some weapons that could be assumed to be size H in the Monstrous Manual. These are the Hill Giant Club and the Frost Giant Axe. The quote, normal versions of these weapons are size M and are usually used by size M creatures. We can assume that since the Frost Giant and the Hill Giant are both size H, that their versions of these weapons are also size H. Both of these weapons have double damage dice, so we can assume that this works with other weapons as well. Here are three examples of half-giant weapons created using these assumptions. The half-giant composite bow. This is a composite short bow scaled up to size H. The arrows are scaled up as well. They're flight arrows that are 5 to 6 feet long, and I put a note that characters can throw them as if they're javelins, with javelin damage and range, just because that sounds cool and you know someone will try it. The half-giant war club is a scaled-up footman's mace, and the half-giant war axe is a scaled-up battle axe. Since these weapons are size H, a half-giant has to use two hands to wield them. The other equipment item that relates to size is how shields work. I did a video on this back in 2023, and the link to it is in the end cards at the end of this video if you want to check that out. The short answer, though, is that shields count as being one size smaller if the user is size L. So a large shield counts as a medium is small, and a small is a buckler. In case you were wondering, the stats for the half-giant body shield are a medium shield scaled up to a huge shield, using the same logic we used to make the half-giant weapons we did earlier. The only special ability half-giants have is also related to their size, and that's how their hit points work. Half-giant characters double their hit dice rolls regardless of what class they are, and then add their con bonus on top of that. So, for example, if a half-giant fighter has an 18 con, and they gain a level, the player would roll a d10 for hit points and then double whatever it says. This means that they very well could roll a 10 and gain 20 hit points, and then they would add the 4 for their con on top of that for 24 total. The first time I read about half giants in the Dark Sun setting was right after I read of Mice and Men, so I've always associated them with the character Lenny from that book. If you've ever played a half giant or have ran games with them in it, tell us about it in the comments. If you have any questions, you can leave them there as well. Thanks for watching, and have yourself a wonderful rest of your day.